Hello everyone. Today, we're diving into something that often confuses English learners' British accents. You might think there's just one British accent, but actually, the UK is home to a wide variety of accents, each with its own charm and quirks.
Exactly, from the famous received pronunciation, often associated with the BBC and the royal family, to the distinct regional accents like Scouse, Geordie, Cockney, and Scottish. Each one brings a different flavour to the language. But the big question is, which one should you learn?
Well, that depends on your goals. If you want to sound more formal and polished, received pronunciation AP might be the way to go. It's often used in academic and professional settings. But if you're planning to live in Manchester or Liverpool, picking up the local accent could help you blend in better.
And let's not forget how accents influence listening skills. If you train your ears to understand different accents, it'll be much easier to follow British TV shows, movies, or even real-life conversations.
So, whether you're drawn to the elegance of RP, the warmth of a northern accent, or the energy of a London Cockney twang, there's no wrong choice. The key is exposure and practice.
That's right. And you know what's interesting? Even within London, accents can vary a lot. You've got the classic Cockney accent, with its famous rhyming slang like apples and pears for stairs. But then there's also multicultural London English, or Emeli, which blends influences from Caribbean, South Asian, and African dialects. It's commonly spoken by younger generations in London and has shaped modern British slang.
Exactly. And if you head up north, you'll find even more unique accents. The Scouse accent, spoken in Liverpool, has a sing-song quality, while the Geordie accent from Newcastle is known for its strong, rolling sounds. If you've ever struggled to understand British people speaking fast, chances are they had a strong regional accent.
That's why choosing an accent isn't just about how you sound, it's also about what you understand. If you've only trained your ears to RP, you might struggle when you visit cities like Glasgow or Birmingham. So, it's a good idea to expose yourself to different accents through podcasts, YouTube videos, and British TV shows.
And speaking of TV shows, if you want to get used to different accents, here are some great recommendations. The Crown for a P and a bit of posh British culture. Peaky Blinders for a strong Birmingham accent. Derry Girls for a Northern Irish accent, challenging but fun. Gavin and Stacey for a mix of Welsh and Essex accents.
That's a brilliant list. Another tip is to watch interviews with British actors. Many actors switch between accents for their roles, but in interviews, they speak in their natural accent. Try listening to Tom Holland London Essex, Daniel Craig Cheshire, or Idris Elba London with East London influences.
And, of course, don't just listen, try speaking too. Mimicking different accents can improve your pronunciation and confidence. It might feel awkward at first, but that's part of the learning process.
Absolutely. So, whether you want to sound like the Queen or like a local from Manchester, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. Keep listening, keep practicing, and you'll develop your own unique British sound in no time.
And let's not forget the influence of British slang. If you want to sound more natural, understanding informal expressions is just as important as mastering the accent itself. For example, if someone says, "I'm knackered," they mean they're really tired. Or if something is dodgy, it means it's a bit suspicious or unreliable.
Exactly, and the slang varies depending on the region, just like the accents. In London, you might hear pun to describe something attractive, while in Manchester, people might say sound means something is good or okay. In Scotland, wee means small, and in Liverpool, boss means great. Learning these little details makes your English feel more authentic.
And speaking of regional differences, let's talk about greetings. If you're visiting London, a casual alright is a common way to say hello. It's not necessarily a question, just a greeting. But in the north, you might hear howie in Newcastle or a up in Yorkshire. Understanding these small cultural differences can really help you blend in.
Absolutely. And if you want to improve your listening skills for British English, try tuning into different British radio stations. BBC Radio 4 has a lot of clear, formal English, while stations like Capital FM or BBC Radio 1 feature more everyday speech, including slang and regional accents.
That's a great tip. Also, watching British stand-up comedians is another fun way to get used to different accents and natural speech patterns. Comedians like Michael McIntyre Sarah Millican, or Kevin Bridges all have distinct regional accents, and their humour often includes cultural references that can help you understand British life better.
And don't be afraid to practice out loud. Whether it's repeating after a podcast, singing along to British music, or even speaking to yourself in the mirror, the more you practice, the more comfortable you will feel. If you have a British friend, even better ask them to correct you or teach you some local expressions.
The key is consistency. The more you listen, speak, and immerse yourself in British culture, the more natural your English will become. Keep challenging yourself, and soon, British English won't just be something you understand, it'll be something you speak with confidence.
And let's not forget British humour, it's a huge part of communication here. A lot of Brits love sarcasm and dry wit. So if you don't understand why something is funny, it might be because it's meant to be subtle. Shows like The Office UK or Blackadder are great examples of this. If you can pick up on that, you're already a step ahead.
Oh, definite, Ali. And another thing about British English politeness. It's almost an art form here. Saying sorry is basically second nature, even when it's not necessary. Someone bumps into you, you'll probably still say sorry, ordering a coffee. You'd better include a please and thank you, or you might get a funny look.
So true. And if you ever need to ask for something, try softening it with phrases like, would you mind? Or I was wondering if, instead of just saying give me. Or I want. Being indirect is actually a polite way to speak here.
Exactly. Even when disagreeing, Brits tend to use a lot of softeners. Instead of saying that's wrong, you might hear I see what you mean, but I'm not sure I agree. It's a very subtle way of communicating that keeps conversations friendly.
And let's talk about British small talk. The number one topic, the weather. It's almost a national obsession. Whether it's raining, which it often is, or suddenly sunny, commenting on the weather is the easiest way to start a conversation with a Brit.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to blend in, learning a few common weather phrases will help. Like lovely day, isn't it? Or typical British weather. Even if it's just a passing comment, it helps create a sense of connection.
And if you're living in the UK or visiting, embracing British culture will help your English feel more natural. Try a full English breakfast, visit a cozy pub, watch a bit of Strictly Come Dancing. These little things make a big difference in how well you connect with people.
And don't worry too much about making mistakes. Brits generally appreciate the effort. And if you're friendly and open to learning, you'll fit right in. Keep listening, keep practicing, and soon enough, British English will feel like second nature.
And speaking of blending in, let's talk about accents. The UK has so many different regional accents, and they can vary massively even between neighbouring cities.
Oh, definitely. You could travel just an hour from London and hear a completely different way of speaking. There's the Cockney accent in East London, the Scouse accent in Liverpool, the Geordie accent in Newcastle, and so many more.
And let's not forget the Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish accents. Sometimes they sound so different from standard British English that even native speakers struggle to understand. But don't worry, most people will slow down if they see you're not familiar with the accent.
Exactly. And if you're learning British English, it's a good idea to expose yourself to different accents so you don't get too used to just one. Try watching regional TV shows, listening to different radio stations, or even following British YouTubers from different parts of the country.
That's a great tip. And another thing that confuses a lot of English learners is British slang. Some words that make sense in America, for example, mean something totally different here.
Yes, like, if you hear someone say they're knackered, they mean they're exhausted. If something is dodgy, it means it's suspicious or unreliable. And if someone says cheers, they're not just toasting with a drink, it's also a way of saying thanks.
And if someone calls you mate, don't be confused, it's just a friendly way of saying friend, even if you've just met them. But if they call you pal in an angry voice, it might mean trouble.
Oh, and let's not forget banter, or bants for short. Brits love to tease each other in a light-hearted way, and it's often a sign of friendship. If someone jokingly makes fun of you, it's usually just banter, not meant to be rude.
Good point. But knowing when it's banter and when it's serious can be tricky. The best advice: if in doubt, just smile and play along.
And don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand something. Brits are usually happy to explain if you say, sorry, what does that mean?
Exactly. The more you engage with native speakers, the more natural British English will feel. So get out there, chat with people, and have fun with it.
And while we're on the topic of communication, let's talk about British politeness. It's one of the biggest cultural differences people notice when they come to the UK.
Oh, absolutely. Brits are famous for being polite, sometimes even overly polite. Saying please, thank you, and sorry is second nature here.
Yes, in fact, Brits say sorry for everything even when it's not their fault. If you bump into someone, they might say sorry before you even get the chance to.
And if you ever need help in a shop or on the street, just start with excuse me or sorry to bother you, and people will usually be happy to assist.
That's a great tip. Another thing to keep in mind is queuing. Brits take queuing very seriously, whether it's waiting for a bus, at the supermarket, or even at a bar. Cutting in line is a big no-no.
Yes, if you accidentally jump the queue, expect some disapproving looks or even a polite but firm excuse me, there's a queue, you know.
Speaking of British habits, let's talk about tea. If you spend time in the UK, you'll quickly realise that tea is more than just a drink, it's a way of life.
So true. Whether you're visiting someone's home, working in an office, or just having a chat with a friend, tea is always part of the equation. And don't forget to ask how do you take your tea, because everyone has their own perfect tea to milk ratio.
And let's not forget about builder's tea. That's a strong, milky tea with sugar, often preferred by manual workers, but honestly, lots of Brits love it too.
And while we're on the topic of drinks, let's talk about pubs. The pub culture in the UK is massive, and it's not just about drinking, it's about socialising.
Exactly. Pubs are where people meet after work, watch football matches, have Sunday roasts, or even do pub quizzes. And if you're with a group, buying drinks in rounds is common. You buy a drink for everyone, and then someone else gets the next round.
And speaking of food, let's mention some classic British dishes. People always ask about fish and chips, but there's so much more to British food.
Definitely, there's the full English breakfast with eggs, bacon, sausage, beans, toast, and even black pudding. There's shepherd's pie, bangers and mash, and of course, Sunday roast with Yorkshire pudding.
And let's not forget scones with clotted cream and jam. But here's the big question, do you put the jam first or the cream first?
Oh, that depends on whether you're Team Cornwall or Team Devon.
No matter which way you eat it, British food is all about comfort. And once you embrace it, you'll realise it's actually really good.
So if you're planning to visit or live in the UK, embracing these little cultural things will help you fit right in.
And speaking of fitting in, let's talk about British humour. It's something that confuses a lot of people who aren't used to it.
Oh, absolutely. British humour can be quite dry, sarcastic, and self-deprecating. Sometimes, it's hard to tell if someone is joking or being serious because Brits deliver jokes with such a straight face.
Yes, if someone says something that sounds a bit harsh, there's a good chance they're just joking. It's all about subtlety. For example, if you trip over, a Brit might say, "Nice one," instead of asking if you're okay.
And another classic British response, if you're having a bad day and you tell a Brit, they might say, "Could be worse," or even "At least it's not raining."
Which, let's be honest, is probably not true. The weather here is so unpredictable. You can have sunshine, rain, and wind all in one afternoon.
Exactly. That's why small talk about the weather is so common. If you don't know what to say to a Brit, just mention the weather.
It's the ultimate icebreaker. Just say something like "lovely weather today, isn't it?" Even if it's clearly miserable outside, and you'll probably get a chuckle.
And speaking of British quirks, let's not forget about the obsession with apologising. We mentioned earlier that Brits say sorry a lot, but honestly, it's next level.
Yeah, Brits will say sorry even when they've done nothing wrong. Someone bumps into you, and you'll probably be the one to apologise.
Or if someone steps on your foot, both of you will say sorry at the same time. It's just automatic politeness.
And let's talk about British manners in general. One thing people notice is how often Brits say please and thank you. If you don't say them, people might think you're a bit rude.
Oh, definitely. Even in a simple exchange at a shop, you'll hear, "Can I have a coffee, please?" Then when they hand it over, "Thank you." And then the cashier says, "Thank you," back.
It's a constant cycle of politeness. And if you really want to sound extra polite, adding "would you mind?" or "I was wondering if" makes a big difference.
Like instead of saying, "Can you help me?" a Brit might say, "I was wondering if you could possibly help me." It just softens the request.
But at the same time, Brits don't always say what they really mean. There's a whole hidden meaning behind British phrases.
Yes, like if a Brit says, interesting, that doesn't necessarily mean they found something interesting. It might mean they disagree, but don't want to say it outright.
Or if they say, not bad, that could actually mean something is quite good. And that's a bit tricky, usually means that's impossible.
Oh, and my favourite time might pop by later. That usually means they're definitely not coming.
It's all about reading between the lines. British communication can be very indirect, so you have to listen carefully to the tone and context.
But once you get used to it, you'll start picking up on all these little cultural nuances. And honestly, it's kind of fun once you crack the code.
Yeah, once you understand the unwritten rules, everything starts to make sense. And honestly, the British way of speaking can be really charming.
Oh, absolutely. There's something about the mix of politeness, dry humour, and subtle sarcasm that makes conversations so interesting. But it does take some getting used to.
Definitely. And let's not forget about the British love for queuing. If there's one thing Brits take seriously, it's standing in line properly.
Oh, yes, jumping the queue is basically a crime here. If you ever want to see a Brit get genuinely annoyed, just try cutting in line. You'll get the classic excuse me, with a raised eyebrow.
And even if they don't say anything, they'll give you the look. You'll know you've broken the rules.
Exactly, but honestly, it's one of the things I love about British culture. There's an unspoken respect for order and fairness.
And another thing Brits love, tea. We can't forget about tea. It's not just a drink, it's a way of life.
Oh, for sure, tea is the solution to everything. Feeling stressed? Have a cuppa. Had a long day? Cup of tea. Someone just shared some bad news. Shall I put the kettle on?
And it has to be proper tea. None of this herbal stuff, just good old-fashioned black tea with milk.
But don't add the milk first. That's another debate in itself.
It really is. Brits take their tea-making methods very seriously.
And it's not just tea, there are so many little British traditions and quirks that make the culture unique. From Sunday roast to pub culture, from loving a good moan about the weather to talking about the latest football match.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes British culture so interesting. It's full of these little details that you don't always notice at first, but the more time you spend here, the more you pick up on them.
Exactly. So if you're trying to adapt to British life, don't worry if things seem a bit confusing at first. Just embrace the humour, the politeness, and maybe start drinking a bit more tea.
And remember, if you ever don't understand what a Brit really means, just listen carefully to the tone. And if all else fails, just say sorry, it'll probably work in any situation.
Haha, so true. Alright, that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed this dive into British culture.
Let us know if you've experienced any of these British quirks yourself. And don't forget to follow for more fun conversations like this.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.